And welcome to this special American presidential election edition of Q&A. I'm Tony Jones. The major parties have chosen Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton to go head-to-head in November. We've chosen our panel. Free-thinking political satirist PJ O'Rourke, who's visiting Australia with the Centre for Independent Studies. American anti-poverty campaigner and gun-owning opponent of the NRA, Linda Tirado. Australian commentator Crispin Rovere, who argues Donald Trump ain't all bad. Former Premier, Foreign Minister and American politics aficionado Bob Carr, and Lowy Institute Fellow and International Security Analyst Lydia Khalil. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. And as usual, you can watch and listen to Q&A live across Australia on iView and News Radio, or watch in the eastern states on ABC TV, everywhere else on News 24 and Facebook. Let's go to our very first question. It's from Francis de Torre Schinkelberg.
Hillary Clinton has recently criticized Donald Trump by saying that a man who can be provoked simply by a tweet shouldn't have control of U.S. nuclear weapons. But surely someone with as much business success as Donald Trump has experience making important and tough decisions. So do you think that if elected president, Donald Trump could actually be provoked into making rash, uninformed decisions?
PJ O'Rourke.
No. No, I don't think there's. This is a giant toddler. I've got 3 kids of my own. We've been through the toddler stage 3 times. You don't let the toddler near the loaded handgun. You know, and that's just, I don't think that Trump is so irrational that he would nuke Indiana because of what Mike Pence has had to say in contradiction of him. But, the volatility is just too high. It's like kids. It is indeed. Let's be fair to Trump. Maybe he's a 7-year-old or an 8-year-old, but it's like kids. You may think they're very mature. You may think that they're very rational, and they are for a minute, and then they aren't. I just think far too immature a person to have the kind of responsibility.
What did you make of the recent story about Trump repeatedly asking a foreign policy analyst why the US can't use nuclear weapons?
Well, that put chills up and down one's spine, didn't it? I mean, that's that kind of question of, again, bringing back to, but Dad, why can't I drink whiskey and drive the car? Not that I'm going to, not that I would even think about that, but, but just why not? If you have to ask, you're in trouble. Basically.
He did openly talk about using nuclear weapons against ISIS just earlier this year in an interview, but then again, he wasn't the only Republican candidate to say that.
No, there was Ted Cruz wanted to carpet bomb them, and I'm thinking, didn't they pretty much invent the carpet over there? I'm not sure that's going to work.
Yeah. Linda.
I mean, Donald Trump's yelling at babies. So I feel like if we're talking about who has the temperament to be the president of the United States of America, maybe we want it to be the guy that's not yelling at babies. I think further, it's been interesting to me that so many of Trump's gaffes are such unforced errors, and they're easily mockable, which tells you that he's internet savvy. He understands how to get the publicity. So it's not like he's doing this and not understanding his effect, which I think is actually a little more frightening. That he's willing to play on all of those things and kind of stoke that fear. But at the end of the day, you have an entertainer that's been put in place to run for president. And you asked about his business experience, which I think a lot of people overlook. His business experience hasn't really been that successful compared to anybody else that's run huge corporations in America, basically.
And I'm describe himself as the blue-collar billionaire.
And that's because he's largely been as broke as I have my entire life, which is great because I was a Burger King worker. Maybe not so great if you're a guy that's worth $10 billion or whatever number that is today. So I'm afraid his business experience just isn't really playing for me because I don't see a whole lot of success. And where he has run businesses for a long time, I see exploited workers and I see unpaid bills and I see stories of contractors not being able to, keep their businesses open because Donald Trump was trying to make a little extra money keeping that check back.
Let's go quickly back to our question of Francis. It sounds like you're an American. I mean, do you feel that his business experience will make a difference if he becomes president?
Yes, I do. I just think it offers kind of a different perspective than a career politician. And obviously, there's certain situations where that won't be directly applicable, but I think in terms of mindset and in terms of approaching certain situations, I think that'll definitely benefit him if he becomes the president.
And you're not worried about him having his finger on the nuclear button?
I mean, I don't want to say I'm not worried, but I'm not
willing to maybe take a risk.
I mean, I'm not a supporter of Donald Trump myself.
I'm not worried either.
But I just don't think that he simply will be able to enact crazy, decisions that will have big rash complications simply because of the checks and balances position, and whoever he brings into his cabinet will simply just not let him make, crazy things that will cause a lot of chaos.
All right, Crispin, you just said you're not worried.
No, I mean, Trump's approach to American use of nuclear weapons is entirely mainstream and entirely consistent. He said he hates nuclear weapons. He never wants to be in a position where they might have to be used. But so long as they exist, he will not rule it out entirely. That's exactly the same as Barack Obama. That's exactly the same as most presidents. So there is really, if you take him at his word, yes, you can talk about his temperament and whether he'll react to a tweet, but he seems pretty emphatic that...
Have you ever heard a presidential candidate talk so often about the use of nuclear weapons, including even suggesting you might drop one somewhere in the middle of Syria?
I've never seen a presidential candidate ask so much about it. People...
You think that's because people are a little concerned that he might, in fact, use one?
Well, of course. And we can have a broader discussion about whether any one person should have that kind of power to use nuclear weapons. There is a strong push to increase the restrictions and the circumstances under which nuclear weapons might be used, and to increase the fire break that should exist between conventional and nuclear war. But whether Trump specifically has said anything that is outside the mainstream of American discourse on the use of nuclear weapons, I don't think that he has.
Bob Carr, what do you think?
Take the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. John F. Kennedy in the White House was being advised by Curtis LeMay and others in his military command to bomb Cuba. We know that would have been tantamount to triggering a nuclear exchange. Would you have preferred the cool-headed judgment of two career politicians from Boston, John F. Kennedy and Robert Kennedy, or the flamboyance and anger of Trump in the White House at that time? The question answers itself. The thing about Trump that worries me in connection with the nuclear trigger is that this is someone whose dominating emotion is anger. He hasn't been able to conduct himself on a single day of this presidential campaign without resorting to anger. There was that Islamic family, the Khans, addressing the Democratic Convention. Few took notice of what they were saying. It was in a barely rating period of the broadcast, and he could not constrain himself from going after them the next day. His pursuit of the judge with the Hispanic parents was another example of how he sacrificed even an opportunity to go after his Democratic opponent, giving in, as always, to his dominating emotion, which is a fury with the world. He is a very angry man.
So, Bob Carr, just on the broader level on nuclear weapons, what do you make of his suggestions that it wouldn't be a bad thing if Japan had nuclear weapons, and the same applies to South Korea and even Saudi Arabia?
Yeah, well, this is very worrying. This is unravelling the security arrangements that have prevailed in the Asia-Pacific and which Australia is part of through the ANZUS Treaty. We'd be in the peculiar position as Australians, an ally, a treaty partner of the United States, of watching a President Trump unravel arrangements that were being considered vital to the maintaining, avoiding nuclear exchanges in the region in which we live, and would place us it would really challenge us. Would we want, as Australians, to have the rotational presence of one of our warships in the American fleet in Korean waters were such a president to be making these sorts of decisions? Would we be able to contemplate the sort of embedded nature of Australian military and the United States Armed Forces, with the number 2 in charge of the Pacific Command for America being an Australian? Would we be well advised, at the same time as we engage with the Trump administration, steering them away from some of the extreme options he's entertained, to just move sideways from the military integration that we've got with America at the present time. I'd like to think, as we contemplate the possibility of a Trump administration, we're looking at how we would exercise our right as an alliance partner.
So, Bob, you put that as a series of questions, and I presume you're really posing it as advice to a future Australian government in dealing with President Trump. Are you suggesting that we should wind back in some way the ANZUS alliance obligations?
I'm suggesting that, first of all, we engage with them. The alliance works both ways. It is a running argument, and we would be obliged to seek every opportunity to tell the Americans that inaugurating a trade war with China by putting a 45% tax on American imports from China would be disastrous, and telling them, as I believe a respected ally of the United States, that withdrawing nuclear protection from Japan and South Korea would compel those countries to acquire their own nuclear weapons. Australia's got something to say, and we can say it, but at the same time, I would be very uncomfortable if we had a warship on rotation next to ships of the American fleet in Japanese waters under a President Trump. And I don't think there's a case for the high level of what would be called embeddedment of Australians in the American command structure with a Commander-in-Chief of America, a President Trump.
Lydia, Khalil, do you share, they're quite profound concerns from a former foreign minister, do you share those concerns?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the former Minister Carr has been saying highlights exactly how dangerous Trump has already become, and that he's, in fact, has already opened up this conversation, where this conversation would never have happened earlier. I mean, this sacrosanct relationship between America and Australia and its key allies, now everything is being thrown into question. So
not only Australia, obviously.
Not only in Australia, with our NATO allies, so that's quite dangerous. So it's gone beyond a joke right now. It's actually gotten into the danger zone. There's a lot to unpack, I think, from the questioner's question and the comments, you know, about his position on nuclear stuff. I mean, but the reality is that he has no position. He has no articulated position on anything, and that's what makes him so risky. Crispin mentioned that, you know, he hasn't really said anything unconventional, but that's because he hasn't said a whole lot. I mean, Barack Obama, in contrast, had a very clearly articulated non-proliferation thought frame and strategy going in, whereas Trump, nobody knows. He's so unpredictable, and that's very, very dangerous in a presidential candidate. And I think win or lose, he's already kind of set us back on that international and national security front just by the nature of what he's putting out there.
Got another question that relates to this very thing. Let's go to Lachlan Blair.
G'day. My question's to the whole panel. Since the Second World War, Australia has embraced the United States largely as our best political mate and our security guarantor. Given Mr. Trump's populist isolationism and Mrs. Clinton's caving to the Bernie bro left on the Trans-Pacific Partnership, can Australians still rely on the United States as a friend and a partner in commerce and security?
I'll start with Crispin, because I can see you burning to jump in on the discussion earlier when Bob Carr was mentioning the dangers to our alliances.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'll pick up from the questioner first. I mean, I have every confidence that Donald Trump has a very positive opinion of Australia, right? Because if he didn't, he would let everybody know.
Perhaps he doesn't even know we exist, Crispin.
Well, that's not true.
Well, you're lucky in that sense, yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that Trump has been doing with his discussions on foreign policy is exposing some of the myths that have existed for a long time. For instance, what is the nature of America's nuclear assurances towards Japan? Is the United States going to have a nuclear war with China over the Senkaku Islands? If not, what measures should Japan do for itself to enhance its own security? These questions do need to be canvassed. And just because the foreign policy establishment in the United States has been a closed shop for a long time and everything has been kind of taboo and off the table, like with many other things with Trump's campaign, he has opened up the discussion in foreign policy as he has in domestic policy.
Well, you compare him to Nixon and the Nixon Doctrine, as it was called. A lot of people thought that was an isolationist policy. It didn't turn out to be. What do you think Trump will do? No one can really guess, except for the fact that he seems to be having a bromance with Putin, what his actual foreign policy is.
Okay, well, historically the United States has sort of oscillated between interventionism and what I would call realism, not so much isolationism. And in times of national greatness, like the end of the Cold War, they're keen to export their ideals to the rest of the world. When the Americans are severely burned, such as after Vietnam or after Iraq, it swings the other way. And Nixon sought to constrain his foreign policy towards a set of specific strategic objectives that aligned resources with outcomes. Trump seems to be doing the same. With regards to Russia, it's kind of like a reverse Nixon. Trump wants to improve relations with Russia to further isolate China. He is very concerned, or he seems to me to be very concerned, that American foreign policy at the moment is just pushing Russia and further towards China's orbit. And Trump sees China as America's principal hegemonic challenge over the course of the next few decades.
Bob Carr, I'll bring you back on this, and whether the alliance is in some form of danger, whether it should be rethought. You've already sort of talked a little bit about that. What about the broader level?
No,
and that question have dealt with both Hillary Clinton's position on the TPP and Trump's isolationism.
I think it's got to be said about the ANZUS Treaty that both sides are committed to it because it's in our long-term interests. In other words, it's more important than a single presidency. So Australians, by and large, had reservations about George W. Bush. He was very unpopular in Australia. But during his 8 years as president, the polls showed continued majority support for the ANZUS Treaty. In other words, Australians are capable of looking at their long-term interest. I just think in the context, in the architecture of ANZUS, should Trump become president, we've got to be prepared to have a running argument with whoever is his Secretary of State, maybe John Robert Bolton, the former short-term ambassador to the United Nations under George Bush. I think he lasted about 5 months. He would never have been endorsed by Congress. We've got to have a running argument with them, trying to get them away from the policy on Japan and Korea and on a trade war with China, and at the same time just protect ourselves from that embeddedment that we've got in their defence structure. But the treaty itself is all about Australia's long-term interest, and I think it's a correct reading of where Australians are, that we probably benefit more from having America as a partner, even during periods when America, in its choice of its president, goes a little mad.
PJ O'Rourke, it won't surprise you, I suppose, to come to Australia and find that the alliance itself is being questioned because of the ascendancy of Trump, who may or may not become president.
An alliance most Americans don't know exists.
Yeah.
Here in a country that many Americans have somewhat confused with Austria or possibly ostrich. And I count Trump as one among them. To the young man's question, America is this kind of wonderful rich uncle. It's got like a lot of power over your possibilities and your future. But at the moment, that Uncle Sam needs treatment. He's having issues. I think that you should be patient because I agree with Bob. I think over the long haul, we are closely linked countries, and that's not going to become unlinked. But I also think that you might want to, for the next 4 years, if the worst happens, you might want to sort of keep your distance and, sort of be prepared to go it on your own a little bit because that's a troubled bunny, And yes, Crispin's right. I mean, Donald Trump does bring up some important issues, but we know from our Dostoevsky that the babbling of idiots can be extremely informative, and I know from raising my children that the babble of children can be, they can bring up startlingly good points. Daddy, why do we like the Japanese? They weren't very nice in the war. Well, point taken. That doesn't mean that I turn, the U.S. foreign policy over to the 12-year-old, even though he has raised an interesting point about our relationship with Japan.
His basic argument is that America is paying for everyone else's defence. He wants NATO to pay for the European defence. He wants the Japanese and the Koreans to pay for their defence, and presumably the Australians to pay for their defence.
Yes, yes, and I would like each of my 3 children to pay for my car and my whiskey and my cigars and occasional vacation in Australia. You know, and I think, you know, look, what are you going to do? Is America is going to be the most powerful country in the world, which it is for the foreseeable future. That will doubtless change someday, but for the time being, we are the most powerful country in the world. And when the Amex bill comes due, it gets sent to our address, and we'd better pay it. You know, that's the price of being an extremely lucky, large, powerful, and rich nation. You know, we could wish it otherwise, and we could hint, you know, that they might contribute a little bit of Britain could get a little more of your allowance could go to bombs and tanks and stuff, don't you think? You know, we can't make them, and in the end, we have to pay the bill.
Lydia, I'll go back to you. Going back to the question, is the alliance under any threat? It's obviously been questioned here, you mentioned before, and in other countries.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the alliance is strong, the force is strong, but at the same time, I'm not so blasé, I think, as some of the other panelists are about this all. I mean, I spent a lot of my career looking at the Middle East, and for the first time in my life, I see some of those authoritarian tendencies come out, the same ones that give rise to these kind of demagogue leaders that we've been seeing in the authoritarian Middle East come through Trump. And that's a very scary thought to me as, you know, as someone from the U.S. And this embrace of authoritarianism that he has. You mentioned his bromance with Putin. This idea that I alone can fix it, that line that he said during his convention, that's very worrying to me. I think maybe because I've spent so much of my time looking at other regions of the world where it's very easy for this to kind of rise up. And, you know, democracy is a fragile thing. Open society is a very fragile thing. So maybe I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer in the room, but I am a little bit, you know, a little bit less blasé about it. I think it can be dangerous. There's been many serious people within the United States who, no serious international expert or national security person has come out in favor of him. Many have actually come out and said he is an actual national security threat.
The intelligence community, by and large, those who've spoken seem to be making that point.
They've made that point. And they're not people who would generally be natural Hillary Clinton supporters as well. So, so I'm nervous about it. I think it is, I think he's dangerous. And I think we've laughed about him, and we have this debate about whether he's crazy, but now it's not, oh, crazy, not funny, haha, but, you know, there is a serious debate in America of whether a major nominee is crazy.
From crying.
Yeah.
We laugh to keep from crying.
On the joke half, it's either that or.
Yeah, no, I know, but it's, you know, I think because I've seen it, you know, you see it in other countries how this.
You know, that is such a good point, because the thing that bothers me most about Trump is not Trump himself so much. I don't think he'll win. I've been wrong about everything in this election cycle so far, so I hope, I'm touching wood here. But what I don't like is just what you brought up, is that impulse what I don't like is the impulse to like a demagogue, to like a demagogue at all, any kind of demagogue. And Trump's a very bad demagogue. Let's be fair to the man. You know, this is no Mussolini. It's no even Franco. It's not even Perón. He's like Evita. You know, and he can't string 3 sentences together, let alone sing. But what if somebody comes along? What if what if a demagogue who's good at this comes along? And America is in a mood for. I don't like America creeps me out. That America is in the mood for a demagogue.
Yeah, he could be the harbinger of something to come. It may not be this Trump, but it could be the Trump in 4 or 8 years' time, as America goes through the throes of losing whatever's left of its industrial self, and becomes a society shaped by global forces that Washington can't control. People keep talking about the anger of America, the anger of white male, working class, rusted on Democrats.
Hey, wait a minute. I'm not a Democrat, but otherwise,
Are you angry?
I fit the description. No, I'm not angry, but I'm scared.
The poll, I'd be interested in your view on this, but the poll showed...
Hang on, what I'm going to do is Bob, we've got a lot of questions and I'm going to come to some of those and we'll continue that discussion, no doubt. Remember, if you hear any doubtful claims, send a tweet using the hashtags FactCheck and Quanda. Keep an eye on our Twitter account for the verdicts. Well, the next question comes from Matthew Thomas.
Thanks so much. I have a two-part question. First, I'm wondering how much of the anti-Hillary rhetoric is due to her position as the first female candidate? And then second, are there lessons to be drawn from Julia Gillard's time in office?
Let's start with our female panellists. And Linda, what do you think?
I mean, yeah, a good portion of the stuff that she comes in for is due to her being the first female. Any first is going to come into that. We've seen it with Obama. You know, we see it with gay candidates across the country. Anybody who's at the vanguard of some progress is going to come in for more hell than they're really due. But I also think that you can say that the woman has come in for a lot of unfair, you know, ad hominem attacks, and also is kind of problematic. And so going back to the earlier point about we're worried about this demagogue, and on one hand we have Trump saying I'm the only one that can save us, and on the other hand we have Hillary not saying I'm the only one that can save us, because if she said that, then she'd be saying it. But we all know that it's meant to be, you know, she's the only one that can stop Trump now. And what I found is that it's become hard in America to have a discussion about the system and how we got here and how we're going to stop ourselves getting here next time. Because we are either going to elect Trump or not. I don't know that we can put this genie back in the bottle, but what we can do is seriously look at, okay, but how do we never, ever do this again? And I think that when it comes to Hillary, that question of is she facing sexism? Yes, absolutely. She's a woman in a pantsuit, and that just enrages, for some reason, an entire cross-section of my country.
Can I just put this to you? Gloria Steinem, the feminist icon, was here in Australia a little while ago. She said many men feel resentful of Hillary Clinton, and for many, she's the last female, or the last female authoritarian figure in their lives was their mother, and now they feel unmanned by Hillary Clinton. Unmanned. Do you agree with that?
I will let Gloria Steinem psychoanalyze the entire gender that I've never been a part of. I think she is much more qualified than I am to do that. What I will say is that I have seen, as a female writer, that writes about politics on the internet, I have seen an influx of abuse since Hillary's been running. And if I say something that seems to be pro-Hillary, I know that I'm going to come in for something vicious, where if I say something that seems to be pro-Bernie or seems to be pro-Trump, I'm much more likely to have my ideas taken and people engage with me on a real professional level. So anecdotally, yeah, it's a huge problem. It also, I think, frequently masks and is used as a shield against legitimate critique of her, because I've been told I'm a misogynist frequently, and I'm like, really? That's, hi, I write about feminism, which, you know, doesn't make me immune to critique either, but it does mean that probably isn't the first place that you want to go with me if you're trying to defend your candidate. Like, what would you know? You're just a woman. Okay, guys, let's talk misogyny. So it's 6 1, half dozen the other. Of course she comes in for hell, and she shouldn't. And it's wrong, and we should damn well do better, because there's so many valid things to critique her on that are way much more fun. We've heard misogyny before. Get over it. Let's get on to the real stuff.
Lydia, what do you think?
So, yes, I think sexism definitely plays a part in it, but I think for different reasons that may have been articulated. So she has non-sexist strikes against her. You know, she lies, she's been around too long, she's establishment as they come in a very non-establishment wave in this election. She doesn't have a particularly inspiring message. I mean, her message is, I have a good resume and I'm the most qualified. I mean, really, like, that's not very inspiring. But at the same time, I think where the sexism comes into play is not the fact that it's just she's a woman, but she is a woman who has her naked ambition out on display, who is striving for power. And that's really what we have a problem with, I think, in Western societies. You know, we have women, Prime Minister Theresa May just recently got Angela Merkel, so we see women in power, and more or less we're okay with it, but we don't like to see how the sausage is being made. We don't like to see how women's naked ambition out there. And politics is this huge stage. What is it? If it's not this strive for power. The presidential election is the biggest media stage that there possibly is for this. And I think that's what people don't like. And it was the same thing for Gillard here. You know, people, I don't think, necessarily were against a woman being in power, but they didn't like how she came to power and the fact that it came so publicly. If a man had done that, it's fine, because, that's the model that we're used to for hundreds of years. We are used to seeing men strive for power. We're not used to women do that. And I think it's the case for minorities as well. I think we like to see kind of minority or women leaders kind of like fully formed, like Morgan Freeman. We just want him there to save us from the aliens. We don't like his political machinations and how he got into the White House, so.
Crispin, what do you think? We actually had a question that dealt with some of the negatives that Hillary Clinton genuinely has, the Benghazi affair, her emails and so on. I mean, there are genuine questions about her honesty, for example, that come up about her. What do you say to
For
the
sure.
question?
I mean, Hillary Clinton, if you're asking, is she the subject of sexism, that's an incontestable fact. And it's been that way for decades. And one of her core base of supporters, particularly among older women, who view Hillary Clinton not as a presidential candidate, but as a story, right? They've seen this woman endure the slings and arrows of sexist attacks for her entire career and endure and thrive and succeed, and they want the story to end with her being president, right? That's not reflected in millennials, okay? They look at her as a presidential candidate with all of these flaws you've just mentioned, and they vote for Bernie Sanders, right? So, for Hillary Clinton, she does represent a great feminist story and is an inspiration to a whole generation. I couldn't.
Let me go to PJ. Do you feel unmanned by her in the Gloria Steinem sense?
Oh, and I know Gloria. Gloria and I both come from Toledo, Ohio, as a matter of fact. We grew up not that far away from each other. No, Hillary's really a puzzle to me. I don't feel Hillary and I are smack on the same age. I later moved to suburban Chicago and went to high school 10 miles from Hillary. We were in the same high school class. And what puzzled me about Hillary is she has a visceral dislikability as a candidate that transcends gender. It may transcend species. I just don't understand it. I know people. I've never met her. I interviewed her husband, but I never met her. I know people who know her quite well, people whom I like and I trust, and who tell me that she is, in person, warm and funny. She gets up on campaign stage, and to me, it is like, I feel like, if I were a movie director and I were casting the evil candidate who's lying about everything to do with the political, I would instruct the actor to use that body language, that tone of voice, that script, as a matter of fact. I'd take her speeches word for word and have the actor use that. And I don't know how she does it, because I don't think that she is an evil person. I don't feel unmanned or threatened by her. But I do dislike her as a candidate. Don't know her as a person, but I dislike her as a candidate.
And yet, PJ, you're going to vote for her.
Oh, of course I'm going to vote for her. I mean, look, democracy is democracy.
By the way, voting for her is a lifelong Republican, so that's even more surprising.
Not only lifelong, generational. I am ethnically Republican. My family's from downstate Illinois, not far. The only Democrat anybody my family had ever heard of, they knew for sure was a Democrat, was John Wilkes Booth, who shot Lincoln. We come from near Springfield, Illinois. My great-great-grandfather was involved in the original Ripon Society founding of the Republican Party. I've been a Republican all my life, and so is everyone else in my family. And still I'm going to vote for her, because there's a price you pay for democracy. There's a price you pay for democracy. You cannot always... what makes democracy work is not winning, it's losing. It's losing. You've got to be able to lose to people with whom you disagree and not go into the hills, not arm up and go into the hills. You know,
But I think we understood earlier from what you said about Trump, your reason for voting her is not that you like Hillary Clinton, but that the alternative is so appalling to you.
Well, the alternative is appalling. And also, it's really not about liking candidates. No, I don't like her as a candidate. I don't know her as a person. I just disagree with her. I consider her to be wrong about everything. Wrong about absolutely everything, but I consider her to be wrong within the normal parameters of wrong. You know, I mean, it's wrong I'm used to, wrong we're experienced with, wrong we can allow for, wrong we can repair. You know?
I think, though, that you have to remember that Hillary knows that about herself. Like, she's the first one to say, like, I actually make a terrible candidate out on the stump. She is running on her record and her CV and saying, you know, I'm steady, I'm competent, I'm good at the job, I'm not good at the job, you know, interview, but get me in there and I do really well. And so I think that lack of likability, especially next to Bill's charisma, where everybody is comparing her to essentially like the rock star of the 20th century as far as charisma goes, you know, I think that might be some of that unfair comparison where, like, okay, well, she might not be good at running for the job, but I mean, Donald Trump is wildly entertaining. We talked about his genitalia during a debate, though.
So we don't have children here, but we have children at home.
I said it appropriately. It's fine. We all have it.
She is an extremely smart woman. She is an extremely experienced woman. She is 68 or 69 years old. Why didn't she do something about this? I mean, there's this stuff called media training. You know, you got a coach. They tell you, don't talk like that.
Yeah, but how many amazing wonks do you know that could never sit up here and make jokes? Like, that would be amazing with nuclear codes. Nobody should let me hear nuclear codes.
I'm not asking her to make jokes, but there is something that she does up on the stump that rubs a lot of people the wrong way, and not just those who are sexist. We'll take them as a given.
This is beyond, like, she's acknowledged it's your biggest flaw.
But why doesn't she do something about it?
Okay, guys, I'm going to interrupt you because we're going to do another question. We'll keep the questions going. They are related anyway to the topic we're talking about, all of them. This one's from Jennifer Zedell.
In the last 12 months, we've seen success from individuals who have previously been seen to be anti-establishment candidates or political outsiders. For example, we have Donald Trump, Pauline Hanson, and we had the unexpected Brexit vote. If it appears that the population is growing discontented with and reacting against our system of electing representation. Do you believe these types of results are isolated incidents, or should we expect more of the same, and is that necessarily a bad thing?
Bob Carr, I'll start with you then.
I think there'll be a self-correcting process about it. I think nothing will be more educational than a Trump presidency. It will result in an enormous rethinking. The sense of betrayal will be very rapid in coming. How does someone implement the promises that he has made? I think we've seen a self-correcting process in the rise of the Green Party in Australia. Its support hasn't continued to rise. In the last election, it was, about 8%, I think, is the national vote for the Senate. These things sort themselves out.
Well, it sorted themselves out with 4 senators for Pauline Hanson, for example, and 3 senators for another independent candidate.
That's right. But look at Palmer. Palmer got in there. It would have been possible after the previous federal election to have seen him as a demagogue, a little like Trump, I guess, who could have gone places and had candidates in other states, taken other House seats. But the public looked at him. The public was entertained for a period, and then the public dropped him. There's no alternative here but to trusting the good sense of the voters. And we're going to see, certainly we've seen, you can agree that on the bottom line we've seen a major challenge to the established party system. In some jurisdictions you can call it a two-party system, but that has been challenged. Nowhere more than in southern Europe, where you've got an organisation like called, I think, the Five Star Movement, the number 2 political party in Italy. The Australian ambassador to Italy sat down with 5 of their members of parliament recently, and he said to them, I understand you've got a policy that explains a lot of your success of doubling pensions in Italy. He said that, of course, would make the country entirely bankrupt. And they said, yes, but you don't understand. It's not a matter of economics, it's a matter of justice. Now, that sort of insane protest movement, that demagoguery, will correct itself. That won't last. it's unsustainable.
Well, let's go to Linda. This is, in a way, your area of specialty. Do you see where the disaffection is coming from in the United States? It's leading to a vote for Trump, as his son, anyway, likes to call him, the blue-collar billionaire.
That's just so adorable. Yeah, I do. The disaffection comes from the fact that we are disconnected from the system. And so back to your question, you know, voting in enough one nation senators that Turnbull's got to make deals with them is problematic when you're coming up against, you know, you just heard about Dondale, right? And we've got all of these commissions and all of this important stuff that the government needs to be doing. You've got the economy and all of that. And what you're looking at is the rise of the Tea Party. And is that something that you want to do? And is that actually how we got to Trump? So the disaffection that we're feeling, that you guys are saved from, is that we're basically trapped in a two-party system where you've got a choice between that guy you don't like and that other guy that you like even less. And no matter what you do, apparently it's the most important election of our lifetimes and also Armageddon. And when that is your reality every 4 years, and we don't have those choices of, oh, we'll push it one way, we'll push it the other, that leads, I think, to a lot more people feeling disenfranchised. And then you add to that, like, kind of the undercurrents that we have. Our infrastructure's crumbling. The Katrina, the levees in New Orleans, the same levees are about to come down because they were fixed improperly. Our bridges are crumbling. We don't have, you know, high-speed rail. National broadband is kind of a pipe dream that we hope to get to by the middle of the century, because we're the most technologically advanced nation in the world. And so, you know, we just got chip and pin this year, guys, like this year. So, yeah, the disaffection is real because we are working harder for less. We have more jobs, we have more casual work, we have less stability. We are buying houses later, we're getting married later. We do that because we're stuck with crippling debt and crippling payments that we can't afford and housing bubbles that we're inheriting. Like, I mean, I'm on the very first edge of millennial. I was born in 1982. It's kind of frightening looking at my future and what was left for me and for my younger siblings. And more than that, all of the things that we're gonna have to pick up and fix. So then you get Black Lives Matter, and there are people out actually saying, no, this is not okay. You don't get to do this. We are going to shut down the economy as much as we can until we reckon with it. And all of it comes together, and then here you have this guy going, hey, I can fix it. What's the problem? Probably China.
PJ, you did spend quite a bit of time talking to the people who, during the primaries, the people who were going to vote for Trump, did vote for Trump in the primaries. What conclusion did you come to about what was driving them to him?
Well, specifically in New Hampshire, in the New Hampshire primary, the thing that I ran up against over and over again was size and scope of government, and it was a little irrational, the conversations a little bit, because I would basically I would say to somebody, why are you voting, you know, why are you supporting Trump? And they would say, look, I've got a small business, you know, and like, I just can't deal with it anymore. I can't get the permits for this, I can't get the permits for that. I've got all this sort of regulatory burden on. Like, I can afford Obamacare for my employees, but I can't afford the paperwork. I don't have a HR department. I don't have a legal department. And this stuff just lands on my desk. And it's just me and my wife running this business. And this is time away from my business. I just can't deal with it anymore. That kind of frustration. Now, I'm standing there thinking to I'm listening here, you know, but I'm standing there thinking to myself, and electing a maniac fixes this in what way, you know? But what they were frustrated. They were not angry so much in my experience with interviewing these people, but extremely frustrated. And I think that this is not just a phenomenon in the United States. This is a global phenomenon. There is a frustration with the elite. And you here in this room are all members of that elite. Why? Because you are interested enough to come down here to listen to some people who are kind of boring, talk about issues, you know, that are kind of important. That makes you part of the elite. And Brexit is certainly an expression of frustration with the elite. There is frustration with the elite. Putin is also an expression of frustration with the elite, with the post-Soviet elite that so screwed up Russia with their incredible corruption, not to mention drunken tomfoolery.
Which he was a key element, of course.
Well, of course, yes, which he aided and abetted. Yeah, but he, I mean, bad people use this kind of frustration. Another part of this frustration is that the technology and the economy are changing very, very fast. And not only are they changing fast, but they're changing in a non-linear way. I mean, bad as the Industrial Revolution, dark satanic mills, all of that, bad as some of the effects of the Industrial Revolution were, at least it was linear. Once you'd seen a railroad train, how surprised were you by an automobile? It was just a locomotive off the track, right? But with the way that globalization and electronic whatever it is, electronic stuff I can't explain, is changing our economy. It's happening so fast and in such an unexpected ways, so many twists and turns, it has people frightened. Then you get a situation like the Middle East, and you can go on and on. I mean, there are dozens of things out there that have come together at this moment in a kind of confluence that has caused a global rebellion against the elites, and the manifestations of it are not pretty.
Let's go to some of the less pretty manifestations. We've got a question from Helen Eade.
So with Donald Trump's recent behaviour, such as his clash with the family of celebrated army captain Humayun Khan, is Trump trying to sabotage his own campaign?
Lydia, what do you think? I mean, it was a pretty extraordinary moment. We talked about, Bob Carr mentioned this earlier, of course, this, like what they call the Gold Star families, who this particular Muslim family spoke at the Democrat convention.
Yeah, I think that was kind of one of the few things that really did hurt him. I mean, he said a bunch of outrageous things, and for some reason, the normal laws of politics and campaigning haven't applied, and they've just rolled off his back. But this is one of the things that I think did hurt him, because Muslim family or not, this is a Gold Star family. They lost a son, and he completely picked this feud with them for no reason, and I think it did hurt him in his standing. He didn't listen to reason, he didn't listen to advisors to put it off. So it seems like self-sabotage, but I think that kind of gives you the mettle of the man and of the candidate.
The underlying issue for him was this is a Muslim family, that the mother was being prevented from talking at the convention because she was a Muslim. Yeah. So he was trying to resonate with his people because he's made these claims about no Muslims can migrate to the United States anymore and so on.
Yeah, that's right. And I think, I just want to go back to kind of that previous discussion about this kind of global wave of anti-establishment and anti-immigration and anti-Islam as well. And this idea of it being self-correcting eventually. I don't think it will be self-correcting unless we do something about it. I think that all of this global anti-establishment sentiment that's come up, and also this global nativism and anti-other sentiment that's come about as well, has come about because, frankly, political elites have ignored the losers of globalization, and we continue to ignore the losers of globalization. And we see it here in Australia, the rise of Pauline Hanson, but you also have a prime minister who's talking about how innovation is wonderful and how it's wonderful to be an Australian and all of these things, when for the fact is, for many Australians, innovation is scary. For many people, all of this stuff is very scary, and no one is seriously addressing these very real concerns of these voters and very real concerns of Trump supporters as well. I mean, there is a crisis within the middle class and lower middle class, particularly whites in the United States. There's opiate addictions, high mortality rates, stagnant jobs. All of these things are happening, and there is no serious person in the establishment or outside of it that is addressing those concerns. So they have a voice in Trump. It's a narcissistic, crazy, unhinged voice, but he's given them one. And it's the same thing, I think, too, with this anti-Muslim sentiment that he's latched onto.
Crispin, how do you respond to that? And what is behind the anti-Islamic argument that he constantly pushes forward? And there was actually challenged by Captain Khan's father when he picked up the Constitution and argued essentially that what Trump wants to do, which is stop the migration of Muslims to the United States, is against the Constitution.
Well, what Trump's attack on the Khans was reflexive. It wasn't calculated, and it goes to his deep-seated narcissism. I mean, this is a problem that he had, that he was attacked and he feels the need to respond. And that worked extremely well for him during the primaries, right? Because he calls himself a counterpuncher. So when someone goes after him, he hits them back 10 times harder. They fall in the polls. Everyone else is deterred from going after him. It's one of the reasons he won, right? But unfortunately, it's like one of the great Greek tragedies of this whole campaign, where another important element in this is Megyn Kelly, the Fox presenter, precedes this story, but he attacked her for months and months and months. And eventually it stopped and she went to see him and she had an interview with him. And it really looked like Trump understood what the problem was, right, at that point. That the American people were looking for in Trump someone who, not perfect, but would become a better man and learn to control his worst instincts.
So do you think he's not serious when he says he wants to ban all Muslims from migrating to the United States, when he wants to build a wall along an entire
He sort of retreated from that in his more recent statements, and he's retreated from the ridiculous idea that he's going to get Mexico to pay for the wall that he builds.
From basically every policy he's put forth at this point.
The fact is, his dominating emotion is anger, and looking at American presidents and candidates for the presidency, I don't think he's got any rival in this respect. Nixon, perhaps, but Nixon could control his anger. Nixon could hide his anger. This guy sacrifices the opportunity to go after Hillary Clinton when there's an issue working against her, a revelation about the emails or something else. He sacrifices that opportunity to attack an honourable family that got barely any publicity. The speech was broadcast in a low-rating period during the Democratic Convention. He couldn't restrain his rage, his fury that these people had dared to reflect on him. And that is the worry, that someone in the White House, when something goes wrong with China or Russia or something anywhere else in the world, has got a choice. The choice will be determined by his personal rage. And you didn't face that from a Reagan, didn't face that from a Bill Clinton or even a George W. Bush. It wasn't that psychology at work.
He's not without precedent, though, in American history. I mean, we've seen this before. Yes, he is nuts, but it's nothing new. I mean, really, the Trump rump of the Republican Party is the modern-day know-nothings that were the party that was an offshoot of the Whig Party in the 1850s. I mean, you're a U.S. history aficionado.
Anti-immigrant
and at that
party,
time, it was an anti-immigrant party.
Irish
That's right, German, very nativist. And they basically ruined an established political party in the Whigs. And same parallels to this day. And he's ruining the Republican Party, just like the Know-Nothings ruined the Whig Party. And, so he's amplified and he's loud, but there is a precedent in American history for him.
I wish you hadn't mentioned the know-nothings, because we're bound to get a party like that start-up. The next question. It is a great name. The next question is from Timothy Hunt.
Thanks, Tony. One of the reasons that the Founding Fathers created the US Constitution was to protect the people from a tyrannical government. Now, President Trump would be that tyrant that they feared. So I guess my question is, what would the US Congress and the Supreme Court do to manage Trump as a president?
PJ O'Rourke, I mean, checks and balances question, really. Are there enough checks and balances to...
Yes, there are enough checks and balances domestically to probably keep him from doing too much terrible domestic... Congress, after all, has control of money. And Trump can propose any fool project he wants, and if Congress doesn't vote the money for it, it doesn't happen. And the courts, of course, can limit the kind of thing, like you can't allow Muslim immigration. That's clearly unconstitutional. Problem is that the executive branch of the United States has accrued to itself an awful lot of power. Power specifically having to do with foreign relations, and that includes not only the military aspect, but the trade aspect. You can't blame the Founding Fathers too badly for this, because they didn't see, they didn't really know about the rest of the, I mean, they thought foreign relations, every 10 years or so, we'd have to decide whether to invade Canada or not. That was pretty much it, They didn't really, and international trade was very limited in those days. They didn't really foresee this problem when they framed the Constitution. Then, as time went by in the United States, the executive branch continued to accrue more and more power to itself. This happened under Democratic presidents. This happened under Republican presidents. Probably it happened most under our best president, Abraham Lincoln, given the crisis of the Civil War, took on a great deal of executive power that has really never gone away. This is the thing that worries me. It worries me on all sorts of levels. It worries me on the immediate level of Trump. It worries me on a more theoretical level that one branch of our government should not have this so much arbitrary power, that the powers should be separated, checked and balanced, and should devolve to the greatest amount possible upon localities. And so I don't like this from any point of view. And I'm hoping if there is a light side, a bright side, if there is a bright side to the Trump candidacy, I hope it will be on some focus on just how unduly powerful the President of the United States has, over the centuries, has become, and shouldn't we crank that back a little bit?
Yeah, now that we're talking in terms of American history, which I'm very happy with, this is really the first time a classic American demagogue has won the nomination of a major party.
That's quite true, because the Know Nothing was an excellent example, but two things. There was no, who is it? They ran somebody like Franklin Pierce or something after he had drunk
his president, but
his way out of the presidency.
But what I'm getting at...
So they didn't have real leadership, and also the executive didn't have the kind of power.
But thinking of more recent times, Joe McCarthy didn't emerge as the Republican nominee. Huey Long didn't emerge as the Democrat nominee. He was assassinated before he got a chance. I suppose you can say that.
Well, William Jennings Bryan. Okay, if we're going to talk American history. William Jennings Bryan.
We're not going to talk about it for too long.
Everybody's head will
we ought to talk about is the Democratic candidate in 1896, 1900 and 1908. And he said, receiving the nomination at a convention he took over, "You shall not press down upon the brow of Labour this crown of thorns. You will not crucify mankind upon this cross of gold."
But the message of that, with all those lovely words, his actual message was, we can fix everything through inflation. I mean, he was barking mad.
But he also
let Bob, before you relive the Civil War.
He said, "I don't know nothing about free silver. The people of Nebraska are for free silver, so I am for free silver." That's the spirit of the demagogue throughout the ages.
And I'm for free Linda, so you're free now to talk.
I should have a joke there and don't. What I would say to you, actually, is that if you're worried about Donald Trump having a blank check, then there are places you should worry about it. The War Powers Act, for example, gives the president 90 days to unilaterally make military action before Congress has to kick in the purse strings. On the other hand, we have a Congress that's like so far refusing to do their job that we have a sitting Supreme Court appointee just chilling until we apparently elect the next president. So on the upside, the checks and balances are strong because they're actually doing very little, which is the first time I think in my life I've ever thanked God that Congress was this intransigent. But with Trump coming down the pipe, I'm like, hey guys, you were psychic. Well done in establishing this level of do-nothingness for the last 10 years.
Okay, we've got an American questioner who's got an answer to all the problems that ail American politics. His name is Todd St. Vrain.
Hi. Al Gore would have won in 2000 if 537 more expat voters from Florida had sent in an absentee ballot. The Australian system of compulsory voting seems pretty ideal to me, as I and others in Democrats abroad try to find and help the estimated 8.7 million Americans overseas vote from abroad, including 100,000 here in Australia. In an unprecedented election year, is the idea of American compulsory voting even crazier than the idea of President Donald Trump?
All right, okay, now we're going to keep this one short. PJ O'Rourke, I know you don't like compulsory voting, but...
Repellent, absolutely repellent. If people don't know what the heck they're talking about, don't know anything about the candidates, don't know anything about the issues, don't know anything about the policies, pay them to stay home. You know?
PJ, you may be underestimating the kind of decency and the understanding of common voters. I mean, when everybody votes, you don't get Donald Trump.
At the moment, with my country going completely insane, I do feel a little hesitancy about criticizing anybody from. But I still, my classical liberal soul just it creeps me out, the idea that you march people down to the donkey vote, down to the ballot box.
Go, Linda, go.
Only if there's democracy sausages. We don't have democracy sausages. No, actually, my knee jerk is actually the same as PJ's. I would be more inclined to support it if it wasn't marching people down to vote in a two-party system that doesn't have, open financing, that is mostly funded by dark money, that is going through such, the system that we have now. I would not say that we need to force Americans to participate in that system and give a fig leaf to the process when so many of us don't believe that it is working as it was meant to or as it should. But, fix the rest of government and then come back and talk to me about compulsory voting.
Let's hear from our other American panelist, Lydia.
I think it's one of those good ideas that will never see the light of day in America. It's, I think compulsory voting would address a lot of those campaign finance things. There's an enormous amount of money put into those campaigns to get out the vote, not just to put their message out there. So I think that would help fix that.
Okay, we've got time. I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't mean to jump over you there. Sorry.
No, I was just saying if we're not going to get gun control, we're certainly not going to get compulsory voting.
Let's get gun control first.
Yeah.
So if you had compulsory voting, you might get gun control. Now we've got time for one last question. It comes from Liz Rossiter.
Thank you. Continuing the legacy of Jon Stewart and The Daily Show, several current events programs with a comedic slant have come up, such as ones with Samantha Bee, John Oliver, and Stephen Colbert, getting more of a mainstream audience. They've all been telling truth to power in a different way, especially given the ongoing feud that Trump has had with people such as Megyn Kelly, and then the downfall recently of Fox boss Roger Ailes. What does this say about the role of media in informing voters in this election? Can comedy actually serve to educate, inform, spur voters to action in the way that Fox News was very adept at galvanizing conservatives into action?
No, it doesn't do a damn thing.
Comedy doesn't do a damn thing?
I'm speaking as a comic. It's useless.
I would say my work largely consists of telling stories of my own economic oppression, sexual degradation at work. If I wasn't telling jokes the whole time, I'd never be able to get that message out. It would just be far too depressing, and we would all want to die very, very quickly. Instead, I make it a little more entertaining, a little more engaging, and I go, yeah, I really appreciated that guy's offer to, whatever. But instead, I dumped a bottle of beer on his head. And that's actually a true story, and one that I tell with relish, because with that emotional engagement and something that isn't nasty, people can actually hear it a little bit better. Now, whether it's effective in creating social change, this man's been doing it for a lot longer than me. But as far as activism, then I think it's a useful tool.
So, PJ, I'll just go back to you because you said it's rubbish. I mean, is it a coincidence that Jon Stewart disappeared and Donald Trump appeared?
Got out while the getting was good, didn't he? Problem with something like Trump is you can't laugh it away. Humor can serve certain purpose in keeping people's attention on an otherwise dry issue. Maybe. Jon Stewart was very good at that. I appreciated it. John and I didn't agree about a lot politically, but he was a guy who really did his homework, and I have tremendous respect for him. But when it comes to something like Trump, people have been masterful at making fun of Trump. They have done wonderful work. John Oliver, in particular, I got to really hand it to him. People have really, if you could laugh Trump out of this race, he would have been so far gone, so long ago, we wouldn't even know who we were talking about tonight, Didn't work. Why didn't it work? I come back to this rebellion against the elites, a revolt against the elites. And among those elites are everybody in show business. When they make masterful fun of Donald Trump, the Trump supporter looks at that and says, you're making fun of me. You're making fun of me. You're telling me what a dumbass I am because I support Donald Trump. I support Donald Trump because I'm angry. I'm angry about some real things, some things that have some actual meaning, and all you do is make fun of me. Well, here's an extra double middle finger for you. I'm going to go out and vote for Trump twice,
Crispin.
Doesn't work.
Well, certainly comedy is really good at bringing attention to fringe issues, like things that people wouldn't otherwise be aware of, right? But in terms of the presidential campaign, it'll have next to no effect, okay? And I think one of the things that people underestimate about, say, Donald Trump is that here is a man with no experience running for office ever. He enters a race to be the presidential nominee of a major political party, crushes 16 seasoned political rivals, does it on a fiscal shoestring and obtains more votes than any other candidate in the history of the Republican Party. It's going to take more than just, some satirist to really explain that phenomenon.
Well, all of the rivals are pretty useless. I mean, that's one explanation.
Well, perhaps, but in any other race they would have won. Like, everyone expected Jeb Bush to come out on top because he had the organisation and he had, all the advisors. But no one was interested in that. And I mean, I can go on for ages as to why I think Trump has done it.
Unfortunately, because we're over time. But Bob Carr.
I'd like to see the candidates use humour more often. I think of the great Gough Whitlam using humour to devastate his political opponents. There's not much wit, there's not much liveliness in Hillary's speeches in diffusing the Trump challenge.
And Lydia.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a policy wonk. I'm not funny, and people don't care about facts, really. They want to hear a good story, and that's what Trump provides, and I think what satirists provide and what CNN and Fox News provide, a story, and that's what people want to listen to.
I think the panel's come to the conclusion that he's not actually funny either.
Yeah.
I think that's probably where we'll have to leave it for tonight. Please thank our panel. Now, PJ O'Rourke, Linda Tirado, Crispin, Rovere, and Bob Carr, and Lydia Khalil. Thank you very much. And next week, Q&A will have a change of pace with particle physicist, rock star and award-winning science broadcaster Brian Cox, whose latest series, Forces of Nature, is on ABC TV tomorrow night. Australia's new Minister for Science, Greg Hunt, will also be joining us, the first Indigenous woman elected to the House of Representatives, Shadow Minister for Human Services Linda Burney, and mathematician Lily Serner, who unlocks the puzzles on the SBS quiz show Letters and Numbers. So until next week, good night.